Welcome everybody to our, fifth edition of Bible Bites, whatever episode this is, if you want to consider them episodes. Today we're in Ecclesiastes 5, still learning from Solomon and his under the sun mentality. Now I split this one actually up into two because I felt like it would take much longer than I want these videos to be. To actually talk about Ecclesiastes 5 because there's so much truth inside of it that we really need to dive into. We're going to see the second half of Ecclesiastes 2, which I'll get into next time, is this proverb that Solomon writes that just is filled with truth and understanding of human nature. But before we get into that, what I want to get into is the first part of Ecclesiastes 5, which is fulfilling your vow to God. Now, Solomon still is writing from this under the sun mentality, right, where everything is meaningless. But even within that, he's writing and he understands the value and the authority of God when he's writing this. And so he's writing this, he says this at the beginning that he is the preacher or the teacher, as it were, in Ecclesiastes 1. And so the preacher here, the teacher is basically, even with the vastness of human existence is meaningless without eternity. Here, Solomon is still saying that God is still worthy within this whole thing. So that's what we're going to read in today. We're in Ecclesiastes 5, starting at verse 1. Guard your steps when you go to the house of God. Go near to listen rather than to offer the sacrifice of fools, who do not know what they do wrong. Do not be quick with your mouth. Do not be hasty in your heart to utter anything before God. God is in heaven and you are on earth, so let your words be few. Dream comes when there are many cares, and many words mark the speech of a fool. When you make a vow to God, do not delay to fulfill it. He has no pleasure in fools. Fulfill your vow. It is better not to make a vow than to make one and not fulfill it. Do not let your mouth lead you into sin, and do not protest to the temple messenger. My vow was a mistake. Why should God be angry at what you say and destroy the work of your hands? Much dreaming and many words are meaningless. Therefore, fear God. And so we see in the first part of Ecclesiastes 5, Solomon is reflecting upon the character and the holiness of God, right? And so he says to guard your steps when you come to God. And this is a thing where, like, you might have heard it said, watch your heart, or something like that. This is essentially what this is saying, is that our actions matter in the presence of holy God. What we do, what we say, how we treat others, this all matters in the presence of a holy God. And you can see that by the very last verse, right? But fear God. Not a are you scared of the dark fear, but a healthy fear of His holiness, of His majesty. And this is the when compared to us, right? Especially in this mentality of the things that Solomon is saying, right? Is that if human existence is meaningless, God is everything. And so that makes total sense with his mindset when he goes through here. And so even in the under the sun mentality, it's wise to honor God with all you do. Now I want to kind of talk about this this small little proverb that he puts here, where he says, "Go near to listen rather than to offer the sacrifice of fools who do not know what they do wrong." And this is what they do wrong. This is what he's saying in this little proverb. "Do not be quick with your mouth. Do not be hasty in your heart to utter anything before God. God is in heaven and you are on earth, so let your words be few." And when I read this, the first thing that comes to my mind is our prayer life. When we come to God, how is our prayer life? Are we quick to listen? Are we quick to speak? Right? How many of us take the time in our lives to look around for God's answers to what we say, or even to the very worship of God? So I want to read to you this quote that I found. I think it's very, very poignant to this fact. "When we come before God, our minds are full of our own business rather than the house of worship of God. When we talk too much, we usually talk like fools. This is especially bad in the house of God." And it just makes me think, like, how often have I come to the throne of God without true worship intent in my heart? Right? How often do I come to God with prayers of even just this coronavirus, right? Of healing and keeping people safe. How often do I really come to prayer in worship? And it makes me think, because, man, I'm a sinner. If that's a sin, a way to be a fool, well then that's me. I really need to consider how we approach the throne of God and what we are really putting into our prayers. Not that we can't ask for any things, right? Jesus says this. Jesus says that we can ask for what's on our hearts. But how often do we let what's on our heart override the worship of God? I think that's really kind of what Solomon is saying here. And the second part of this, what we've read, starting at verse 4, I don't know if you guys can see in the video, but I'll hold it up here. It's actually highlighted in my Bible here. It was highlighted for some time, and so when I went back to go study this, to write this video, it kind of surprised me because it had been a while since I had been in the book of Ecclesiastes. And I don't know if I truly shared this story with you guys. I told you guys that this is one of the things that brought me to my relationship with Christ. But when I was studying this book when I was a lot younger, it was me and my youth minister, and we were heading to dinner. We were at this service project, and this is one of the things that we did during the week, is that we studied the book of Ecclesiastes in our own private time. And as we were walking to dinner, he was asking me about my day and stuff, and I looked him straight in the eyes and I told him, I said, "You know what? I hate the Bible." And he laughed because he knew what I meant. He knew that I didn't really hate the Bible, but that I hated what it meant for me as a sinner. And I hated what it meant that the truth that's inside of it, I had to transform my life. And so in that aspect, I hated it because it was this book of truth and life. And the way that I was living and the things that I was doing were contrary to what was true and what was righteous. And so in that fact, I didn't really hate it. He knew what I meant. It was a moment of laughter, but the truth still stands, is that This book of Ecclesiastes is a book of wisdom. Even though it has this huge despair inside of it, there's still a ton of truths. And this highlighted section that I have here is one of the most important ever. Right? When you make a vow before God, do not delay in fulfilling it. He has no pleasures in fools. Fulfill your vow. It is better not to make a vow than to make one and not fulfill it. And I think this is oftentimes we get into trouble when we make promises before God, whether it's to Him directly in prayer, or maybe it's in front of others to really justify what we are saying as true, right? But this is a fool's errand, because God will hold us accountable to the vows that we make in front of Him. This is one of the reasons I have this on the board, is that God keeps His promises, and that's what He expects from us, right? When we make a vow before Him, when we make a promise before Him, He expects us to have the same integrity that He does. And He will hold people accountable. And so there's been a recent moment in my life where this very thing happened, where I was sitting around a table with a group of guys, and one of the guys, to make his point, promised before God, and then immediately realized the severity with which what he did happened. And truth be told, I hope that God holds him accountable for what he did according to this scripture here, because it's no small measure to make a vow before God. And so I want to leave that with you guys here, that Solomon, in all of his wisdom, says that it's better never to do that than to make a vow and not intend to fulfill it, or even in your non-intention, just there's no way for you to fulfill it. Just remember how serious this is. God will keep His promises. He expects you to do the same thing. I would even go so far as to say that He expects you to keep your promises with one another. If you promise something to somebody, this is a covenant that you have between them. Your word and your integrity is vastly important. And that's something that we need to remember in this day and age. Now, the last thought I have here is it's so crazy how Solomon just ends this. Therefore, fear God. Is because, our existence without eternity is meaningless. But God is mighty and holy, and even in all of this that He comes and He talks about, He recognizes how truly mighty and holy God is, and how much we should give our worship to Him. So next time we will be in the second half of the second half of Ecclesiastes 5. We're going to break down this excellent proverb that Solomon comes up with. And we're just going to learn the wisdom that he has inside that. So I hope you guys enjoyed this small bite. I hope to see you guys next time. Thank you guys for watching. Everybody have a fantastic day.